The Artist of Fate. It all began on another bleak day. David sat by his computer with another letter ripped up and thrown away. He had once again been rejected from another art school. It had always been his dream to make a career out of what some called a hobby, but nothing was working out the way he had hoped. He stared at his monitor, trying to come up with a new inspiration, but the depressing news just kept pushing its way back into the forefront of his mind. David had always loved art from the time he was young and doing sketches. He had been told he has a talent whenever holding a pencil or a paintbrush. Where he really felt enjoyment lately, though, came from digital art. He had invested a lot of time into perfecting his skill, either through his phone or laptop, and even had managed to sell some of his artworks on a few forums. Commissions were definitely not rolling in enough, though, to make a career of it. He continued to stare at the screen, hoping to be inspired. The latest application he was using came from a new company he had never heard of before. They called themselves Lobster Images. It was a strange name, but the recommendation came from someone who had bought a few of his artwork pieces a while back, so he felt like he could trust the guy. Their new program was pretty cool. It had a few features he hadn't seen before. It was pretty buggy at first, but he was amazed with how quickly they would respond to feedback and improve the program. As he sat pondering what to draw, a new notification appeared from his email from the company. New feature launched. Commission work. Enroll now and we will buy your artwork. You will be assisting us in testing our new uploading software. Once launched, we will be able to send direct customer requests to you and quickly transfer your fee within just a few button clicks. Intrigued, he navigated to their webpage, logged in, and found a new section on commission work. He clicked the request to sign up, which was when the dissertation-sized terms of service appeared on his screen. He quickly scrolled to the bottom and just accepted. Almost instantly, he received a new notification from his email. Commission request. Upload any original artwork. Fee, $50. David was taken aback with how quick this all was. Maybe this could be my ticket out of that job and on to what I really want to do. He kept thinking over what he could possibly draw for the commission. He felt so broken up over the rejection letter. Broken. He looked over to his mirror. It took him an hour or so, but he recreated the mirror in the program, only in this version, the glass had shattered and was falling to the ground. Each shard of glass reflected a different image of David's face using a wide range of emotions. Satisfied with the work, he uploaded, shut down his computer, and went to bed. Just before turning out the lights, an alert appeared on his phone from the bank. $50 deposit from Lobster Images. He was impressed with their speed, and smiling, went to bed. On his way to work, he made the usual stop at his local coffee shop. He didn't particularly like coffee, but there was one thing that made this place special. The shop was where his friend Blair worked. Blair was a longtime friend from elementary school. She and David had become closer by the time they reached middle school, but she ended up moving somewhere else in 8th grade. Years later, the two reconnected during an art class that he was teaching as a side job. They reconnected quickly and started to hang out every so often. As more time passed, they began to hang out just like they did years ago. But he also began to realize that his feelings had grown something more than just a friend. He had thought a few times about trying to ask her out, but never found a good opportunity. And though he didn't want to admit it to himself, he was worried about her rejecting him. For now, he was happy to just be her friend until he could build up the courage to ask her on a real date. He entered the shop and immediately saw her smile. "Hey you," she called out to him. As he approached the counter, before he can even utter a word, she pulled out a bag and a cup with his order already prepared. "You're just predictable as always, David." He laughed. Because the store was pretty empty at the moment, they had a few minutes just to talk. Just before he was going to leave to work, she stopped him and said, "Hey, by the way, a few of my other friends are thinking of having a house party for Julia tomorrow night. She just moved into a new place. Would you be interested in going too?" Julia was a high school friend of hers, and the two were extremely close. Yeah, sure, that would be great. He got the details for the party and left with a big grin on his face. He arrived home from work late, pissed off at the day he just had. He didn't know what he had done to get on his manager's bad side, but it seemed since day one that the supervisor had been out to blame David for every little mistake and issue. Even worse was the supervisor's lackey, Jeff, an incompetent buffoon beyond belief, and used that to get David into trouble whenever he could. It didn't matter who would stand up for him or if there was a hard evidence that David was nowhere near Jeff whenever an incident occurred, but his supervisor was more than happy to put all the blame on him anyways. Frustrated, he took off his shoes and walked over to his laptop to draw some more, until he collapsed to the ground. He screamed as he felt something bite into the middle of his foot. He looked down and saw at least an inch of glass sticking out, blood trickling everywhere. He rushed to the bathroom, gathered up some bandages, and patched up the wound. Coming back into the room, he looked around shocked to see his mirror had shattered, pieces just littering the floor. He swept everything up, and as he did, noticed little reflections of himself in the shards. That's weird, he thought, but he shrugged it off, finally getting a moment to just get off his feet and open the drawing program. He was struggling a bit with a new idea for what to draw next. Images of his day of work just kept flashing in his head, so he started to draw a scene from the store. As he thought of different ways to vent, he decided to draw an image of the supervisor and Jeff being walked out of the store in handcuffs. It was a simple image, but it was a bit therapeutic to see justice being given out, even if it was just an image on a screen. He saved the image and prepared to shut down the laptop. Before he could, a new email alert. Lobster Images. New commission. Submit a new original piece of art. Fee, $100. David blinked. $100? Hell yes. He uploaded his new image of Jeff and the manager before going to bed. As he was setting his phone alarms, he received a new notification from the bank. $100 deposited from Lobster Images. David whistled and went to bed with a smile. The next day continued like every other. A quick conversation with Blair, and they agreed to meet up and go to the party together. A bit of concern on her face when he told her about the mirror, though he assured her he was fine. Then it was off for another miserable day at work. Except it wasn't. Oddly enough, both his supervisor and Jeff weren't there at the beginning of their scheduled time. It was a little bit weird that they had taken off the same day. Usually one of them was always around, but it wasn't unheard of. It ended up being much more relaxing, with him and his coworkers actually being able to talk and enjoy work for once. It was really peaceful until the screaming started. Everyone rushed out into the main floor, where David saw both the supervisor and Jeff being placed in handcuffs and escorted off the property. Jeff was the one screaming about some kind of mistake, and David was pretty sure he heard his name coming out of Jeff's mouth a few times. David grew pale as his mind flashed to the image he had drawn last night. The scene in front of him was almost identical to his drawing. The business closed for the day as everyone was being questioned. It turned out that Jeff and the supervisor had been caught stealing a substantial amount of money from the store. The owner chose to close the store down early as the police was questioning everyone before determining that the supervisor and Jeff were in fact working alone. The owner told everyone to take the rest of the day off and they would reopen tomorrow. David went home to think. That couldn't be real, could it? He was flabbergasted. The mirror shattering? That was just a coincidence. But the arrests, it was like a real-life equivalent of what he had drawn. He started to wonder, could I be psychic? He pulled out a piece of paper and sketched out a drawing of himself winning a scratch-off. He went into the store and promptly lost $5. He breathed a sigh and went home. It's just a stupid coincidence, he convinced himself. It was nice getting some time to relax for the rest of the day, but what he was really looking forward to was seeing Blair. After getting dressed and ready, he went over to her apartment at the appointed time. He He was nervous as he was pretty sure everyone there would be complete strangers to him, but Blair's presence was enough to relax him. She introduced him to a lot of people, and he was happy he was making some new friends. Everything was going well until Chris arrived. It was clear from the shock on Julia's face that Chris was not actually invited to this party, but he found out that she was willing to tolerate him because Chris was her brother. Julia quickly regretted that decision when Chris proceeded to harass everyone he came across like some kind of high school bully. David did his best to avoid Chris, but eventually they did cross paths. Chris took a few digs at him, but David was more than ready to just ignore him and move on. Chris didn't like this and kept trying to mess with him. David returned to a group that was chatting out back, and David hoped Chris would get bored and just move on. Blair joined the group soon after, and that seemed to be enough prompting for Chris to invite himself as well. "Hey cutie, long time no see." It was clear that Blair was not happy to be in Chris's presence as she shifted away from him. "Oh, don't be like that." That's when he slapped her from behind. Blair immediately slapped him across the face, and just when it seemed like Chris was about to retaliate, David saw red and shoved him to the ground. This was just the invitation that Chris was hoping for. He got to his feet and punched David right in the face before tackling him to the ground. That was enough for most of the others to jump down and pull Chris off David. Julia screamed for her very large boyfriend, screamed at Chris for what he had done, and told him to get out under the threat of calling the cops. After things had finally settled, Julia apologized for what happened, though David just shrugged it off. "I'm sure it's just a bruise. I'll be fine. Don't worry." Without Chris being there, the rest of the night went rather well. Eventually the party wore down, and David headed home after driving Blair back to her apartment. It was late, so he decided to head straight to bed, when a new notification popped up in his phone's email alerts. Another commission for lobster images. The new request asked for him to draw an original image of someone losing. He took a moment, a little paranoid, and sent a quick reply. "What happens if I fulfill this order?" After a moment, "You will be paid a commission price of $200. Uncertainty filled his mind. He kept having a nagging thought that by uploading, he might just be deciding what will happen in the future. He laughed at himself. "You're being ridiculous. It's a picture. It's fine." He let his mind wander for a bit, unsure of what the next drawing should be, until he felt his face throb again. He made a decision. He sketched out an image of what was clearly Chris. In the image, he showed Chris having lost some kind of fight with a much larger man, with Chris clearly being knocked on his ass with a broken wrist to show for it. After he finished the image, he had a twinge of guilt, and that thought resurfaced. What if this is real? After a moment of doubt, he submitted the drawing to the database. A moment later, his phone had a new notification. Another $200 in the bank. Unsure of what would happen next, he went to sleep, a little anxious. He was met with a big surprise the next day. He got up as usual and went to say hello to Blair. It was unfortunately packed that morning in the coffee shop, so all they really had time for was a quick hello, after which she asked if they could meet up after their work was over. "I have something I want to talk to you about." David looked a bit surprised. "About what?" She made a quick gesture indicating her lips were sealed, and he just sighed and agreed. He had a broad smile as he went to work. After the initial setup for the day, the owner of the store gathered everyone around before they opened. Everyone was excited to hear that one of their favorite assistant managers, a woman named Kelly, would be promoted to the supervisor position. David and Kelly had been friends for years now, and he was so excited to have a competent person in charge for once. The rest of the day went smoothly, and David finally had a bit of a new outlook on his job. Before he could leave, Kelly cornered him. "Hey, before you go, I wanted to run something by you." He sat, and she continued. "So with my promotion, that means there's going to be a new assistant manager spot open. I've been talking with the owner about who should fill it, and I have you at the top of my list." David was taken aback, but excited by the idea. "I can tell you like it. There's going to be an interview next week, but I'm confident you're going to have the best shot." They both smiled. David thanked her profusely. He felt like things were finally shaping up. Maybe the program isn't so bad. After leaving work, he met up with Blair at a small cafe where they had hung out a few times. He could instantly tell it had been a busy day for her. She looked exhausted, but she was masking it pretty well with her smile as the two just sat and talked about their day. He mentioned the possible promotion, and she was excited for him. After a bit more talking, he could see there was something on her mind. "So what's up?" She sighed. "I'm really sorry for what happened last night." David paused for a moment as he thought, "Oh, of course that's what she wants to talk about." After a moment's hesitation, "Oh, you mean with Chris?" "No worries, my jaw's a little sore, but that's not your fault." She shrugged. "I know, but I still felt really bad that you were hurt dealing with his bullshit. He's always been a nasty piece of work." David chuckled a little. It's really okay. I don't mind standing up for a friend." He noticed that she got a bit of a strange look when he called her a friend, but decided not to read into it. "Well, thanks all the same. For as long as I've known Julia, Chris has just been a general menace to everyone he comes across. If I wasn't so close to Julia, I would avoid him like the plague." She seemed to perk up after a moment. "So, about what I wanted to ask you." He felt his heart skip a beat. So there is more, he thought to himself. She was suddenly cut off by her phone ringing. She paused, glanced down at it, and silenced it. "So what I was wondering," the phone cut her off again. She looked down. "Sorry, this must be important." David nodded. Blair answered, "Hey Jules, is everything okay?" David could only hear what sounded like crying on the other end. He tried to ignore it as it wasn't his business. "Oh shit, are you serious?" Blair's eyes seemed to go wide. "Yeah, no, I'm on my way. Just give me a few." David looked perplexed. "Sorry, Julie's having a bit of an emergency. Can we get a rain check?" She looked very apologetic, so David just nodded. "Is everything okay? Do you guys need any help?" Blair shook her head. She's fine. It seems something happened and her brother's being rushed to the hospital. I don't know the details yet. I'm really sorry. She really needs me right now. I gotta go." David nodded and walked her to the front door. He was glad she was in a hurry, because she couldn't see how pale and panicked he suddenly looked. There's no way. It can't be. Arriving home, he slumped down on his couch and pulled up a different art program. He just needed some normalcy to clear his head. Coincidence, he just kept repeating to himself. It's all just a coincidence. He felt stupid every time he tried to convince himself of this. 3 drawings coming true after he submitted them, all 3 matching exactly what his drawing depicted. He knew deep down this couldn't be a coincidence. He became lost in his thoughts as he was making a new sketch. When he finally noticed what he was doing, he saw he sketched out a depiction of his meeting with Blair. It could use a lot of improvement, but he liked the way it was starting to shape up. Feeling a bit better and shrugging off his anxiety, he got ready to shut down the laptop. His phone buzzed again. A new notification from Lobster Images. "New commission request." He grew pale again. He typed a quick response. "What did you do to Chris?" After a few moments, a reply. "Nothing. You drew his fate, so it came into being." David paused at this. "What do you mean I drew his fate?" He waited until the new message appeared. "You agreed to our program. Depictions you submit will determine the fate of those in the images. The program is now tied to you." He stared at the screen. This is a joke, right? Something like this can't be real. Before he could even type a response, as if reading his mind, a new message appeared. "We assure you, this is very real. You are now committed to the program and must see it to the end." David froze. Your new commission: depict something tragic. Minimum payment will be $100. The more tragic the event, the higher the commission will be. David stared at the screen. Something tragic? You want me to depict someone getting hurt? He couldn't do it. It wasn't worth it. If he'd have known that this was real, he would have never created that image of Chris, and he sure as hell wasn't going to hurt someone else now that he confirmed that what he did in the program could hurt them. He typed back, "I no longer wish to work with this program. I wish to decline the commission." There was a long pause before the next message appeared. "You might want to reconsider." He thought, "No, I don't think so." He went to remove the program from his laptop, when suddenly his mouse stopped responding to any of his inputs, and instead opened the artwork he had just created. He watched in horror as, completely on its own, the program added a new element to the drawing of Blair. A large car in the background, heading straight towards where she was sitting. The image was being drawn impossibly fast. Startled, he screamed, "No, wait, please, stop! I'll do it! I'll do it!" The mouse suddenly stopped moving, deleted the image of the car, and closed out of the editing software. "How long do I have to fulfill this commission?" The response was quick. "The commission must be completed before the end of the day tomorrow." He closed out of the computer, and for the first time in a really long time, tears began to flow. He was trapped. He either complied with their request or risked someone important to him. He went back after a while and tried to delete the images of Blair and any image of her that he had created on the laptop, but every one seemed like they were locked, and all he could do is open and look at them. Any option to delete or even edit the image seemed to have been removed. He knew he couldn't back down, and if he did, there would be consequences. David called in the next day. He was too racked with guilt and anxiety to work efficiently. He needed time to think. Knowing what the stakes were, he sat at his laptop and began to sketch. Something simple, something where no one can get seriously hurt. The money didn't matter. He wasn't going to give the company what he knew they wanted. He just needed to give them enough to leave Blair alone. He finally settled on the scene of a car accident. He meticulously depicted a drunk driver being taken away to an ambulance with minor injuries, and the other driver safely looking at the totaled car. He made sure there was no room for misinterpretation. A car accident with minor injuries only, and no deaths. After checking it over for hours to ensure he didn't miss anything, he uploaded the commission, and for the first time in his life, began to pray. He practically jumped out of his seat when he heard his phone alert. Hesitantly, he looked, and then breathed a sigh of relief when he saw it was a message from Blair. "Ready for that rain check?" He was happy to have something to get his mind off this ordeal, so he agreed to meet her back at the cafe. After greeting each other, she jumped in and told him exactly what had happened. Apparently, Julia was still furious over her brother's actions and went to his house the next day to confront him, with her boyfriend trying hard to get her to calm down. Then she and Chris got into a screaming match that ended when Chris slapped her hard in the face. Before anyone realized what happened, Julia's boyfriend pounced, punching Chris in the face, slamming him to the ground, shattering one of his wrists and causing a rib to fracture. By the time the ambulance had arrived, Chris was unconscious, most likely from a concussion. Julia's boyfriend had been arrested, with both of Julia's parents taking Chris's side and claiming that the attack was unprovoked. Her parents have been such nightmares. It's so heartbreaking to hear what Julia's gone through because of them. She stared for a moment. "Sorry, can you just keep what I said about her parents to yourself? I definitely said more than I should have." David just nodded. The two conversed some more before he dared broach the other subject. "So you said there was something you wanted to talk about yesterday?" She blushed a little. "Yeah, I guess I kind of did leave you hanging there." David held his breath. "So we've been hanging out a lot together, and I was kind of curious what your thoughts were about us." She looked at him, and David let out his breath. Well, I'm sorry if I've been keeping you waiting for so long, but I have been meaning to ask if you might be interested in... He felt his voice catch for a moment. In maybe going on an actual date with me? She smiled and blushed a little. Finally! Yes, I would love to. Both of them looked like a weight had been lifted, and they made arrangements for a date the following evening. They continued to talk for a bit before Blair excused herself to the bathroom. David began scrolling on his phone, grin on his face, waiting for her to return, when a new alert came from Lobster Images. His heart sank as he read, "Your last commission was insufficient. You must choose to add a new subject to your original depiction." He groaned. "Please don't make me do this. You must choose Subject A or a new subject chosen by us." He looked at the options. On one side, labeled Subject A, was his drawing of Blair in full detail. Next to that was just the image of a question mark. "You have 30 seconds to decide." He froze, shedding tears, and clicked on the question mark. He saw something take control and begin filling in the new person into the wrecked car. Apparently, this time deciding was good enough. He didn't actually need to draw it. Before he could make out who was being drawn, the phone suddenly shut down, and Blair returned from the bathroom. David apologized, saying he was feeling a little lightheaded and needed to go lie down. Blair checked on him, but after reassuring her he was fine and excited for tomorrow night, they departed. When he got home, he booted up the laptop and opened the drawing of the accident. His heart sank when he saw the finished, submitted product. Sitting in the driver's seat, unconscious and hurt, was Kelly. David let out a scream. David spent hours trying to call Kelly and warn her, but his calls kept going straight to voicemail or would just immediately disconnect. He drove to the store, praying that he wasn't too late, praying that maybe she was there a bit after closing. But as he arrived, no one was in the parking lot. He tried calling everyone he could think of, but all of his attempts were in vain. As he tried to reach Kelly's phone one last time, someone answered. Kelly's mother. She was at the hospital. Kelly was hit in her car by a drunk driver. Both were rushed to the hospital, and Kelly was currently in a coma. David cried, and he apologized. He agreed to call the owner and let him know what happened. David called the owner, informing him about Kelly's accident, and told him he was going to need another day off as the stress was too much. The owner understood and told him to get some rest. David went home, crying and praying that his torment would end. The next day felt like a living nightmare. On the one hand, he was elated to finally have a chance at a real date with Blair. But every time he let himself become a little happy, his gaze moved to his laptop, and the image of Kelly's accident would flash in his mind. He took the day to rest and wait until it was time to pick up Blair. An hour before it was time to leave, he had finished his shower and got dressed. He went back out to the kitchen and noticed his laptop was open. He walked over, and his heart sank again. Displayed on the screen was a picture he had never seen before, but he could clearly make out Blair hiding in some kind of closet, tears streaming down her face. In the picture, the door had what appeared to be claw marks of something very large and trying to get in. David screamed. Suddenly his phone rang. He saw it was Blair. "Hello?" he practically shouted. "David, I need your help." He could hear the distress in her voice. "There's something in my apartment. I keep trying to call the police, but my phone, it's only letting me call you." David tried to reassure her. "Don't worry, I'm here. Let me try to merge the call, and I'll try to call the cops for you." But nothing he did worked. Every time the call would just fail, though the connection with her would remain. I don't know what's wrong. It's not working." He could hear her quiet sobs as whatever was there was getting louder, closer. A message popped up on the screen. A blank canvas was next to the message. New commission. Draw who you would sacrifice to save her. David looked at the screen in shock. She will be found in 3 minutes. David didn't know what to do. He typed a response, "Please, don't do this. I'll do whatever you want, but don't hurt her." The reply seemed to take forever. Fulfill the commission if you wish to protect her. You have 2 minutes remaining. Over the phone, he heard a snarl. "David, please. I think it's getting closer. What should I do?" David kept trying to comfort her. "I'm here with you. I'm gonna get help." He stared at the screen. Am I willing to sacrifice? Can I actually draw someone that quickly? There's almost no time. I have to save her. I have to save her. A new message appeared. She will be found in 1 minute. He looked at his computer, and a single thought ran through his mind. The program is tied to you now. Calmer than he had felt in a long time, David picked up his phone again. "Blair, I'm going to save you." He could hear her confusion for a moment. And in case I don't get the chance to say it later, I want you to know that I love you. He put the phone back down, located the self-portrait he had made a few days ago, and pasted the image of himself onto the blank canvas. Before his eyes, the marks on the door in Blair's picture were gone. He could hear her voice, her relief over the phone. David, I think it's gone. David? Can you hear me?" His ears registered her voice, noted her questions, but his attention was stuck on the image of himself that he had pasted as the sacrifice. Before his eyes, he watched as an image of a figure was drawn just behind him, bearing a large knife. As the image was completed, he could almost hear the quiet footsteps of whoever was approaching him from behind. Knowing what was about to happen, David closed his eyes, and the world went dark.